Business intelligence. Now we're going to see all of these reports. We're going to create them with an administrator. We're going to see what the molder activity is, SQL reports, Excel reports, statistics, libraries and dictionary, external queries, process status, and DBI reports. In order to demonstrate this, I'm going to go to structure and I'm going to public queries. The first thing I want to do is click here on public query and give my public query a name and select a public query. It's called BPMS molder activity. This is going to allow me to see the activity that's happening in the molder of the system. This way I can monitor and see if the stress levels are very high or lower based on these different details or activities that could be happening within the system. All I have to do is save and exit. And now once I've created my report, anyone can access if I haven't restricted the permissions from here, from reports. So I could enter my queries. I could see the new report. I'd hit the button proceed and it would show me the stress levels in the molder during certain days. Here I can see the detail in days and hours. And here I can see the result. So I can see there was more activity, especially of evaluated objects during this moment. Okay, and the rest it's quite the same during the entire week. This could be interesting to monitor the performance. Maybe on a certain date, the server was working a little bit slower. So based on this information, I could see why it was actually working slower. Maybe because it was very busy trying to manage certain events or activities. If I go back to structure, I can also see there's an option called BPMS molders. And from here, I can also monitor the status of the molders. I can see if they're active, if they have load balancing, and if the communication is good. I'm going back to create another public query. This time, I'm going to create a query. It's called libraries in dictionary. All we have to do is click here on create public query. It would take us to this window where we give it a name. We add a securum if we want. We select the type of query. And here where it says libraries in dictionary, all we have to do is select whatever libraries we want. Here I can see a large list of all the libraries that I have in this platform. And I've selected two, reports and documents. So what's this report going to allow me to do? It's going to allow me to see in one unique view the documents that have been stored in both of these libraries. This means I can create a unique view with the documents of all kinds of different libraries. And this is quite interesting because I could also grant different permissions to this specific view. When I go to the grid configuration, what I can do here is customize the view, like add whatever filters I want, whatever columns I want, and so on. Once I've created this, I can access either with this URL. I can just copy the link and paste it on my browser in order to access this new view. Or I could also go here to documents, and there's a button here at the top. It says queries of libraries and dictionary. If I click here, it shows me all the queries. For example, this one here. And now in this query, in this view, what I'm seeing is the documents that have been uploaded in several different libraries, in these two different libraries. We can see some of these documents were integrated in a library that's called library, and then some other documents were integrated in some other libraries that have a different name. So in one unique view, I'm seeing documents that were stored in different libraries. I'm going back to structure, and I'm going back to public queries to see a couple options. We're not really going to enter in a lot of detail here because they require knowledge of external applications. But we have two options here. One of them is called SQL reports, and the other one is called external queries. Now, this option here, SQL reports, allows you to run reports created with SQL reporting services. From the Auto Portal interface, you can actually run these reports. Basically, you create them, it gives you a link, and that allows you to run them within the platform. Now, all you have to do is create the report first in SQL, and then you're going to configure these options here. You're going to add the report, and you're going to be able to access from the platform's interface. Now, if you want to select this other option that's called external queries, it's basically going to allow you to do the same thing. You can interact with an external query via web, via this link that we can paste here. But an interesting thing here is that we could also add parameters to the URL. This can be quite interesting when we want to send certain parameters from the platform to this external query. We're going to see another type of query. It's called Excel. And this option, it's really easy to use. All you have to do is click here on Excel reports. Now, once you've added the name, selected the type of query, all you have to do is configure your Excel report. So what are we going to do here? We're going to select from where do we want to extract the data from the platform, for example, from a process or a family of records. Let's say I want to extract the data from a family of records, and I'll select this family here. It's called articles. Now, once I've done this, all I have to do is select an Excel file here. So I'll click Browse. Let's say this is the file I want to use. Let me open it just to show you what we have to do here. So basically, if we know how to use Excel, all we need to know is that in Excel, we can create columns, and these rows are going to be filled in with the information that we have within the platform in the family of articles that I just selected. So if I have 200 articles, 200 rows would be created here with this data. So here I have to put the internal names that I have in my family of articles. If I want to know how I have to indicate these names here, if I want to know the name of these fields, all I have to do, well, first I'm going to finish here. I'm going to select the Excel sheet. And here I could add some filters. For example, I only want this report to be created under certain circumstances. So here I could say, well, only when the brand is different or doesn't end with Toyota. I could add more conditions, sets of conditions. I could add a different logic operator. So the city does not contain Miami. And I'll save and exit. So what's going to happen here, whenever this link is triggered, whenever someone tries to use this query, the Excel sheet is going to be generated with all the data that we have in the articles family. Now, how do we know the internal names in order to design our Excel sheet? I have to go to structure. I have to go to my family of records called articles. And from here, I'll go to fields in record. Now, here I've got all the different fields that are being used. If I want to know the internal name, all I have to do is click on one of them. And here we can see the internal name. So if I want to add it to my Excel sheet, all I have to do is something like that. I'll just paste it here. Okay. And I do have to add the P&L in front. So I'll have to do this like that. So now I have another field ready to be used in my Excel report. Now, once I have all these rows with data, we already know we can create another sheet here, for example, and we can create reports. I'm not going to enter into all the details of how you use Excel and how you create reports with Excel, but this is a very easy way of integrating your Excel reports with the platform and with the data that you have inside of the platform. So the steps are quite quick. All we have to do is go to public queries. We have to create a new public query. Once we create it, we give it a name. We click here on configure. We select from where do we want to extract the information. I said I wanted to extract the information from a family called articles. Here I'll browse my Excel that has been previously prepared. And here I'll add whatever conditions I want. If I don't want conditions, it's always going to be created. Now, whenever someone clicks here, let's say I copy the link and I paste it here, it's going to download the Excel sheet with all that information, with all those rows generated. I could also create the report by going to reports, going to my queries, and if I have permissions, I could just click here and we can see the report would be generated. So it's going to create the Excel sheet with all the data that's in the family of records in that exact moment when I clicked on the report. So if my family of records articles has, as we can see here, 5 registers of information, 5 rows, well then my Excel sheet is going to have these 5 rows. There's another very interesting way of monitoring my processes if I go to my tasks, I have an option here. It's called my process status. And I could select a process that I have initiated. And if I go to status, I can see its current status and all the status that has been going through. Besides, I can see an explanation here of how the event I created is changing from one status to another one. Now, in order to configure this explanation and add all of these different status, what I have to do is go to a class of process and configure several control points. So when I go to objects, I can go to this tab here. It's called spans. And here I can type in some text. This is the description of all the different status of the itinerary. So all I have to do is click here and add whatever text I want. And then in each control point, I'll click on it and I'll add a brief description and a name. So whatever I add here is what the end user is going to see from the window of my tasks. So basically, if it's in the status reprocess order, because the flow has just gone through this object, well, then this is the text I'm going to see. If the flow has gone through this object here, through this one here, and through this one here, we're actually going to see a list with the 3 status that it's had. So if I go back here to my tasks, I go to my process status. Here there's several product requests that I've actually initiated. I can select any of them, for example, this one here, and I can see the status. This one here is approval pending. This one here is also approval pending. Let me see. This one's approval pending. The only one that has a different status apparently is this one. So each time the flow travels through a control point, it's going to give me the status. This is very useful to track whatever's happening with my request or whatever processes I initiated. It's quite similar to, for example, when I make a purchase online and the website like Amazon or whatever gives me some information of what I just purchased. So what's happening? Is it in the warehouse? Is it already being delivered? Whatever, okay? Now we're going to see another type of report that's going to allow me to create all kinds of different graphics, like pie charts, donut charts, etc. The first thing we have to do is go to structure. And once we're in structure, we're going to public queries, and we're going to click here on create a public query. Now we're going to give our public query a name. I'm going to give it a name, for example, articles, and I'm going to select the type of query, DBI reports. Once I've done that, I can enter here to start configuring my query. Now, the first thing I want to do is indicate from where am I going to extract the data from my report. Do I want to extract the data from a process or from a family of records? I'm actually going to show you guys 2 examples, but I'm going to start out with a family of records. Once I've selected a family of records, I have to indicate which one. So I'll click here and I'll select this family of records that's called articles. Now, once I've done this, I can create my report based on singular fields or groups of fields. If I select singular fields, it means that for each record that I have in my articles family, it's going to create one row of data. But if I select group, I'll have to select a group of fields here, and that means in my report I can combine data from the record of articles and the data of my groups of fields. This means that if I have, for example, in one of these records, if I have 4 lines, my report is going to have 4 lines for this record. If I have another record with 10 lines, then I'm going to have a total of 14 lines. 4 lines related to the first record and 10 lines related to the second one. In this example, I'm going to select group so we can see how to work with a group of fields. All we have to do is select what group of fields do we want. So for example, I'll select this one that's called promotions. So here, a list with all the groups of fields that are being used in the family of articles are going to be displayed, and we have to select one of them. Once we've done this, we can hit the button save. And now we're going to see a canvas appears where we can start drawing our report, and we're going to have all these different elements that we can drag and drop to this canvas. Now, the first thing I want to do, I want to drag and drop some HTML so I can add a title. When I do this, we're going to see the section appears here. And in this section, I can create one or several spaces. I'm going to add a title here. So I'm going to call this section, this space, I'm going to call it title. So this would be the title of the space. And now inside, I want to add some text. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to put promotions of the articles. Now I'll select this text and I can format it to whatever size I want. For example, I'll add size 14 or 16, whatever I prefer. I'll add a font. So let's say I want it to be this font over here. And I'll add a color for the text. Maybe I'll add this dark gray. And finally, if I want, I can add some borders. I can indicate a different position for the content. So I don't want it to appear right there in the corner. So I'll give it some space to the left and to the top. And I'll indicate the size. Here I can indicate the width and here the height. I'm going to say I want it to be 60. And I'll add a background color red, just so we can see what it looks like. Okay, so this is the space I've created. I can click on the button preview, and this is what it looks like. Really, I want it to be responsive. I want it to adjust to the size of the screen, and it's not doing that right now. So I'm going to go to the section here in its configuration. I'm going to say I want it to be automatic according to the resolution. And now I'm going to save and exit. You can see now it's stretched. It's occupying 100% of the page. And if I click on preview, now I can see it looks much better because I'm occupying the entire screen. This is the option I wanted to go for. Besides, there's an interesting option, an interesting feature here. It's a feature that allows me to set up a minimum amount of space. For example, let's imagine I don't want it to get smaller than a certain size, this size here, for example. Well, I can indicate in the size of this space the minimum amount of space that I want for this content. I'll say 600. I'll save and exit, and now when I open this, what's going to happen here is we can see at the bottom of the screen I don't have any scroll appearing. That's because I have more than 600 pixels. But when I reach 600 pixels, there we go. A little bar is going to appear, a little scroll bar, so I can move it back and forth and see the entire content. This is because I'm saying that my content can't be smaller than 600 pixels. So as soon as it reaches that size, this scroll is going to appear. Okay, I'm going to continue with the configuration. I'm going to add some filters. So I'll click here on this option here and I'll add some filters. I also want this to be responsive. So I'll click here and I'll say I want it to be responsive. And I'll save and exit. Now here there's something interesting because the filters, they're not really going to be displayed by clicking on this option. There's no configuration here. What I'm going to have to do is configure it in some other place. Let me add a name here first. There we go. So now we know this is the space for the filters. Here we have the title. And if we want to configure the filters, I need to go to Data Dynamics. If I click here, first of all, I need to add whatever fields I want from the record to this list here. And down here, I'm going to have to choose which ones I want to enable as filters. So I'll click on Add Fields. I'll select, for example, the name, the class, maybe the barcode, the brand, whatever fields I want, if it's available, the cost price, even columns of the group of fields, since my report is based on a group of fields. I have, for example, a date, like the start date. Let me check here. Here we go. This is a date field. I'll accept the selection. And now of all these fields, I have to indicate which ones I want to use as filters. So I can click here and add these as filters. For example, I'm going to add the name, the class, if it's, well, I'll add the barcode, the brand, and the cost price. Now, all of these can be used as filters, but I have two different types of filters, advanced filter and classic filter. First, I'm going to use the classic filter so we can take a look at and see what it looks like. So if I click here on preview, we can see the result. This is the classic filter. This is the one we're already used to using, where I just have to select the options, input whatever values, and then hit a button proceed in order to display the information. But I could also use an advanced filter. Let me show you. All I have to do is go back to Data Dynamics, select Advanced Filter, and save and exit. Here we can see the result. Now that I have an advanced filter, I can click here and I could use these options. For example, family name has to be greater than, or equal to, or less than, between. I could add more options here. For example, the class must not contain or must not be equal to. And then I can add sets of conditions here and logic operators between them. So this obviously is a more advanced way of filtering the data. It might require some more space. So if I go back to my report, I might realize that this isn't enough space for the filters. But anyways, if I go back to data dynamics and I say I want the classic filter, then we're going to see the result here. They're all displayed horizontally, so they fit well in that space. Now, there's another option here. It's called Intrinsic filter. This option is going to allow me to add filters that the end user can't really take them off. So an intrinsic filter is a filter that we set up when we're building the report, and this is always going to be there, although the user isn't going to be able to see the result. I'm not going to set this up yet. I'm just going to leave it as it is. We'll come back to this option later. So the next thing I want to do is add a couple charts, a couple graphs. So I'll click here and I'll drag this down here. I'm going to add, I don't know, I'll drag it to be about this space. And I'm going to add another chart over here. There we go. Now, if I update the preview, we can see the result. Of course, this isn't how I want to display the data on the charts, so I'm going to have to make a couple modifications. I'm going to go back to the configuration and I'm going to design this a little bit better. In order to design these graphs, I'm going to click here. I'm going to select the type of graph I want, the style. For example, I could change it to this one here. I could also add maybe some other styling options. For example, I could change the position of the content. I can add maybe some more space at the top or at the bottom of the graphic. I could change the background image. I'm going to add an image. It's just 1 pixel wide. I'm going to say I want to repeat it horizontally. I'm going to add a name to this space. For example, I want to call it articles by class. I'll save and exit. Here I can update the result. So now I can see it has a background. For me, it's still too close to the border, so I'm going to add a little bit of space over here. I'm also going to indicate what I want to display here on this graphic. So I'm going to go back in, I'm going to general, and here I'm going to add a few borders of the color white. Now I'm going to chart, and here we have the IDs. It's a counter. I'm going to want to group the data. I'm going to group it by class. This way it's going to show me the different classes. Okay, depends on the type of field I have here. It's going to show me some options or others. If it's a numeric value, it has certain options. If it's a text value, it has other options. I'll save and exit, and now we can see the result here. Okay, now it looks better. So we have all the articles grouped by classes. We have 3 different types of classes. This text is a little bit too small. I'm going to make it bigger. So I'm going to go back in. I'll go to the style here. Here it is, the style. And I'm going to say I want the labels to be size, maybe size 12. Besides, I want to change this maybe to, well, I'll just leave it as it is. Let me check and see if with the modification of the size it's enough. Okay, that's good enough for me. I added some space here at the top and at the bottom, but if I wanted to add some more space over here, I could also do that. Let's do that. I'll go to general and I'll add a little bit of space to the right. I'll save and exit, and here we can see the result. We've got a little bit more margin here. Obviously, all these styling options take a little bit of time. I'm going to invest some time during this presentation, because later throughout the course we're going to use this a lot, and I am going to invest some time here, but later on I'm not really going to stop and try to make things look nice. This is going to be probably the only time I'm going to try to make everything look good, because I don't want to repeat the same configuration options throughout the videos, so you guys don't have to spend so much time watching them. If anyone wants to come back to this video and see how I designed something, well, you guys can always watch this video more than once. Okay, so I'm going to change the header. I don't want it to have a solid color here as a background. So I'm also going to say I want an image. The reason why I'm using an image that's only 1 pixel wide is because this is much better for performance. It takes much less to load. If I just repeat that 1 pixel horizontally, it's going to be the same as if I use a very large HD image or 4K. Okay, let me see what it looks like. Okay, that looks better for me. Now I want to configure this other chart. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to set it up to have the same background. So I'll go to General, Image. I'm adding the gradient. I'm going to repeat it horizontally. I'm also going to add some spaces like I did in the other ones. So I'm going to add some space at the top and at the bottom, just so it has a little bit of air, a little bit of space around the graph. I'm also going to add a few borders here. Now, here I'm adding borders of 20 pixels. I'm actually doing it wrong because I want you guys to see the difference now. 1 second, I'm going to add a name here to the space. It's always convenient to add names to the spaces. That way it's very easy at a glance to see the contents you have here. Anyways, I was saying I was adding these 20 pixel borders. I want you guys to see the result here. Here I have 20 pixels and here I also have 20 pixels, but obviously there's 20 pixels in each one of these spaces. If I want this to have 20 pixels in between both of these spaces, well, I just have to grab the space here and give it 10 pixels to the left. And then I'll go to the other one and I'll give it 10 pixels to the right. That way the sum of both of them are going to be 20 pixels. I'll refresh. Something I've done wrong here. 1 second. Okay, it was to the left here. I got it wrong. And here it should be on the right. Now it should work. So sometimes it's just a matter of fiddling around with the options until you get it right. Okay, so now I like the look and feel, but still I would like this to reach the end of the screen, and I haven't configured the data that's going to be displayed in here. So in order to do that, the first thing I want to do is change this to be responsive. I'm going to click here. I'm going to say I want it to be automatic according to the resolution. So I want it to stretch. I'll save and exit. And now we can see it's 50-50. We've got half of the screen for each one of these spaces, but I would like it to be, let's say 25-75. So I'll add 25 here. I'll add a minimum amount of space of 300 and I'll save and exit. Now I'll do the same thing over here. We'll go to General. I'll say I want this to be 75% and I'll add a minimum size here of 300. I could also indicate the height I want. So I want it to be 350. Now I want both of them to be 350, so I'll change this one too. Okay, let me check and see. Okay, it looks quite good now. All I have to do now is finish the configuration of this graphic here. So I'm going to enter, and here I can add values that are going to be displayed in the vertical axis of the chart. I could add the ID. Yeah, that's enough. I'm going to also add a value to group the contents. I'm going to say I want to group by the date. I have a date field here. I want to group by month. And now the last thing I want to do here is add some series. Sometimes if I don't finish the configuration when I come here to the graphic, I am going to see things, let's say halfway configured, and sometimes I don't really want to configure all the steps. But now let's see the difference. If I select the field by which I want to break down the values in the horizontal axis, we're going to see this is going to be a bit more convenient. So I'm going to add the class here. Oh, I said I want the month here. So I'll save and exit. I'll go back. And now here we can see the result. Actually, I don't like the result. It's a little bit confusing. All the bars are the same height. So I'm going to adjust this a little bit. Okay, all I have to do is make sure I save after I indicate the operator here. And now let's update. Okay, so now we've got it sorted by months. I still don't like the graphic too much. Instead of using this graphic here, I think this one would be a bit more convenient. So I'm going to try with this one and see if I like the result better. Yeah, now it's much better. So now I can see all the promotions that happened in February by class. So which ones were non-alcoholic, which ones were personal items or home items. And I can see the same thing with the rest of the month. These that appear here where it says null, this means that probably there was no value in the date field. That's why it's giving me this value here. If I wanted this to disappear, I could always create a condition. As I mentioned before, I could even create one of these intrinsic conditions. Let me add one just so we can see what it would do. For example, I could say, I want class to be different or does not contain home. Now I can save and exit. And we can see the result. We have 4 non-alcoholic, 1 personal, 3 of home. Now when I refresh, I don't see home anymore. And the user doesn't really know. There's no way they can take off that filter because an intrinsic filter is only for the administrators of the report, for whoever's building this report to control. So the end user can't really do anything about this. Anyways, I like my report. I just don't want this intrinsic filter. I would also like to add a grid below these sections. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to drag and drop this down here. And now I'm going to set up the size and configure this grid to have a few columns. So I go to general. Well, before changing this, I'm going to go into the section and change the option so it's responsive. Now here for sure, I know I want a little bit of space to the left, 20 pixels, to the right, another 20. For now, that's going to be it. Here I'm going to type in grid. And now when I click here on grid, I'm going to add some columns. I can add whatever columns I want. I'm going to add the class, the name, the account. Here it tells me if there's certain columns that I'm going to add to the report that might affect the performance, it's going to warn me. So I'm going to select it anyways. Okay, I'll just add a few more. The promotion, maybe the date, and I'll click accept selection. So this is going to be my grid. Obviously I can customize it much more. I can add different lengths to the different columns. I could change the labels. But for now, I'm just going to leave it like this. Besides, here at the top, I can indicate when someone clicks on the grid, what do I want to display? Nothing. That means nothing would appear. Form, that means I can select any form I want from the process. Or, well, in this case, it's not a process, it's a family of records. So I can select any form I have in the family of records. Or I could also select the extension of the group of fields, because here we're creating a report that's based on a group of fields. So I could actually directly display the extension. So I'm going to try this first one and see what happens. I'll update here. Okay, here we can see the grid. Obviously, it's not very comfortable. We've got a very big scroll here. I'm not interested in having this like this, so I'll have to change the size a little bit. Besides, I'm going to change the style of this graphic so it matches the style of this one here. So I'm going to enter this one here. I'm going to change the style. I think I like this one down here better, so I'll select this one in both graphics. And now I'm going down to this grid and I'm going to select here the height. I want it to be, let's say 450, and let's see what happens. I think it's going to be okay like this. Let me refresh. Okay, now it looks much better. Might even be a little bit too big. I don't want this scroll over here, so I'll just maybe resize a few things. For example, here, maybe with 120 pixels, that's enough. There we go. We've almost gotten rid of the scroll. I might be missing a little bit more space. So I'm going to say I want the grid to be a teensy bit smaller. Okay, that looks good enough for me. Now that I've got all of this, if I click on the grid, you can see nothing happens. When I click on the graphics, nothing happens either. So I'm going to enter the grid and I'm going to say I want it to display a form. And here I'm going to select a form. Let's say I'll select this one here. Now, when someone clicks on the grid, it's going to show them the record. I'll save and exit. And I'm going to go to the graphics. I would also like to display something on these graphics, but in order to do this, I have to click here and configure the grid configuration for the chart details. So I have to add some columns for the charts, like the name, the class, maybe the date. And now I have to indicate what do I want to do when someone clicks on the grid. So we're going to drill down from the graphic to a grid, and from the grid to nothing, or to a certain form of the process that I can select here, or to the extension of the line of the group of fields. I'm going to select an extension, that way we can see both options. I'll save and exit. Okay, I'm going to refresh here and we're going to see the result. So if I click down here, I can see an item, an element, an article with all this data. And besides, here we can see there's a group of fields that has one line with a discount of 30. Okay, so I can see this line here on the grid. Let me see the cost price of this element here. Here it is, it's 2. So let me filter by cost price. So we can see it here. It's a personal item. Okay, let me click here on the graphic. And we're going to see it takes me directly to the extension of the group of fields. So I click here and it takes me directly to the extension. So I'm seeing the information in the extension of the group of fields. I could also open this extension from the form. So if I go into this form, I could go here to all the promotions and then I could enter here. And now I'm in the extension. So I'm seeing the information of this line of the group of fields. So I could enter in both ways, but it's quite comfortable to directly indicate in the configuration of the charts that we want it to take us directly to the extension of a group of fields. This option is only available when we're basing our report on a group of fields. Now, one last thing I wanted to show is when we click, for example, here, there's 4 items. So it's going to display this grid. This is the grid we configured up here. Okay, so here we said we wanted these columns. If I want, I could add more. For example, I'm going to add the barcode. And now if I update, here I'm going to be able to see one more column, the barcode. Okay, so I can design this grid however I want. I can indicate what I want the grid to display when someone clicks on it. If there's only one unique item, it's not really going to display the grid, because why would it? It's going to skip that step. So when I click on it, it displays the grid, and immediately on top it displays the unique bit of data that it has to display. So it's a bit quicker for the user. Okay, so now that I'm happy with the result, I'm going to continue creating another report. I'm going to delete this one here. I'm going to create another one. I'm going to call it demo. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to select a deep business intelligence report. I'm going to enter the configuration. And now instead of a family of records, I'm going to select a class of process. So I'll just select this one, for example. And instead of group of fields, I'm going to select singular fields. I'll save. And now I'm just going to do this really quickly so we can learn the different options, but I'm not really going to bother to design things and make things look pretty. I know you guys can probably do that much better than me. I already showed you the basics, and with that information, it's more than enough to design your own reports. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'll add a points of control here. This is an option that's available for processes. And there's not much to configure here. All I have to do is give it a name if I want. Here I can select the type of graphic. And that's about it. I'm going to save and exit. If I preview, here I can see the result. So we can see this is really quick, very easy to design. Now I'm going to add another graphic. This time it's going to be chronometrics of my process. And in here, all I have to do is also set up the type of graphic I want. If I want to see the chronometrics of the class of process of the task, this is really easy because we've already gone through this, and it's basically the same thing, but inside of a DBI report that allows me a bit more of a better control of the margins I want to add or the position and all that. So here I'm going to put chronometrics. Okay, so we've got our process status, our chronometry. If I update here, we can see the results. So I can see there's several processes on time. Some of them are out of time. And I'm going to add a grid. Well, this grid is going to be a little bit different than the previous one we saw. Okay, so I'm going to enter the configuration, and here, instead of showing a grid, I'm going to select an option that's called my pending tasks. And here, I'm going to say I want to show the supervisor's tasks in a summary. And in the summary here, I could design the look and feel of this box here. I'm not going to do it. This is basically changing the colors, and that's quite easy. So I'm going to put here supervisor's tasks. Okay, now I'll update here, and we can see the summary. So here we can see he has 0 new tasks out of 6 that he has in his task inbox. If I click here, we should be able to see the result. I haven't configured the grid, so I'm not really seeing anything. I'm going to add another grid and add it over here. Okay, so this time I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say I want to see my pending tasks in a summary. I'm not even going to design it. And here I'm going to say I want to see the requester reprocess task. Okay, I'm going to click on update here. And there we go. Obviously the position wouldn't be correct. This looks a little bit funny, but obviously this can be designed much better. All we'd have to do is invest a little bit more time. But this is quite interesting because we can add a different view of our tasks based on how many we have pending. So I have one pending, and besides I haven't even read it. That's why 1 appears here in big. Here I have 6 pending, but none of them are new. All of them have been read. So I'm going to change this a little bit, or I'm actually going to launch a new process so we can see this. I'll go to my tasks. I'll click on start a process. This one here. I'll say I want some material. I want some scissors. I'll send the request. And now this process is going to be pending for approval. So I'm going to receive a new task. Okay, I just received it. So now I have received the new task. So I can go back to the report and we can see now it's updated. So I have 7. I have 1 that's not read. And here I have 1 task of this kind, of this type, and there's 1 that's not read. If I click here, it should show me a grid. And by clicking on the grid, I could access these tasks. But in order to do that, I'll need to configure this grid. So I'm going to add a couple of columns, for example, the process status, who's the creator, and the process start date. I could also add the reference or any other fields I wanted to add. I'll save and exit. Okay, so now when I click here, it takes me to this grid. And now what I want to do is click here on top of the grid, and I want it to take me somewhere. For example, I want it to take me directly to my task. So I can perform it from here. I can say, yes, I'm going to approve it. I'll submit. Now the task disappears. And we can see now here, instead of 7, I'm going to have 1 less. I have 6. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show you is that here, instead of taking us to my tasks, we could actually make it take us to the execution control of a class of process. So I could also click here, save and exit. And now when I go to this option, it's going to take me to the monitoring of this class of process. So there's several options here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but it would be nice to fiddle around a little bit with it. It's quite easy. As you guys can see, I just create this in a matter of minutes. So it's quite useful to just play around with it a little bit and see all the different features. This option is available just in case you create new versions of this class of process. You can always tell your report you want it to actually display the data or the information of all the versions of the class of process, or maybe only some of them. So we've gone basically through all the different options. If we need more information, there's always documentation in the knowledge base. Exercise 402, Part 2.